Let's look at our second game here, the NFC Championship. It is the Detroit Lions on the road at the San Francisco 49ers. And I'll tell you, this is going to be 7 or 7.5, and I can't begin to tell you where it's going to be by the time you watch this video, because since we have been recording this, it has flashed between 7 and 7.5 at multiple books, multiple times. And so this game's starting to get some action. It seems as if the 49ers backers will take the 7. It seems as if the Lions backers are coming in and gladly scooping up the 7.5. It seems to be that's where we're going to end up here with this one. A total is sitting majority across the industry at 51.5. Steven, the 49ers, I think it's fair to say, escaped last week in a win. It was a game in which the Packers did not take advantage of multiple different opportunities that were presented to them. And with that, the 49ers were able to find a way to win the game. Now, there's something to be said for playing your C-, D+ game and still winning. Like, there's something to be said for that. Lots of teams play their C- game and they get housed. Lots of teams play their D+ game and get housed. And the 49ers did not, and were able to keep it close enough along the way to figure out a way to get it done against the Packers. That said, we are still sitting on the other side of a touchdown. If you want to back the Lions, of course, you can get a expensive 7 if you want to back the 49ers. What are you looking at here in this one?
I've been fighting this all week, and I've concluded that I'm not letting recency bias from last week cloud my judgment here on the 49ers. And I will certainly concede that with how scared Kyle Shanahan coached last week and some of the decisions he made, I'm not exactly comfortable laying this many points. But if we are sticking to our process and looking at these teams' ratings for most of the season, I don't understand why it would only be 7. So I would bet the Niners at 7. I'm going to stop at 7.5. I want the push equity with 7. They played the Lions this week. They're 7. Last week, they were 10.5 against the Packers. And just one man's opinion, I'd take the Packers over the Lions right now. You know, if they played again this week, I would bet on the Packers, especially if they're getting 3. I just think they're the more well-rounded team. I think starting with the Lions defense and their pass defense, they have gotten extremely lucky for a month and a half straight now, where they're completely relying on turnover variance going their way. They're getting run up and down the field in terms of yards per play in 2 consecutive playoff games now, the latest by Baker Mayfield. So if the turnover variance doesn't go their way, they're going to give up a crap ton of points in this game to the San Francisco 49ers. Offensively for the Niners, I'm going to give Brock Purdy a pass. That was not the first game we've seen Brock Purdy struggle in the rain and not have accuracy the way he does most of the season. So I fully admit they should have lost that game. There were dropped interceptions. That's going to happen any given week with Brock Purdy, but looks like clear skies for this game. I'm not as worried about not having Deebo Samuel here. And for the 49ers defense, I mean, overall, I agree with you, Matt. Like, if you're going to give him a grade, barely passing might even be generous for last week, but I thought the defense played really well. They were put in some tough spots. Overall, they finished the game with Jordan Love having fewer than 200 passing yards and 2 picks. I thought, and I still think, the narrative that the Niners aren't good against the run is a bit overstated and a bit exaggerated. Aaron Jones did finish with 100 yards last week, but 53 of them came on 1 rush. And if you take that one away, he only averaged 3.2 yards per carry against this 49ers defense. They are also playing now a compromised Lions offensive line. Without Jonah Jackson, most likely, Frank Ragnow continues to play hurt, and it's a Niners front 4 that has gotten pressure at a league average rate despite having a bottom 3 blitz rate this season. And I believe that their pressure rate would have been much higher if Eric Armstead didn't miss as many games as he did. He's back now. They're back at full strength, and they were certainly a factor in that game against Jordan Love last week. So now Jared Goff has to deal with pressure and 7 guys in coverage, unlike last week where it's been coming from the blitz when they're facing Tampa Bay. So believe it or not, I actually think 7 is a little bit of a discount on the 49ers here. And I just hope and pray that the fourth down variance and Kyle Shanahan coaching scared, and Dan Campbell going guns blazing and going for every fourth down situation doesn't go against me, because that's the situation where I think I lose the bet.
All right. I will a quick little rebuttal here.
Sure.
So this whole Purdy in the rain thing is the most ridiculously overblown thing in I've basically ever heard. He had the 7th highest turnover worthy play percentage in the NFL over the course of the season. He just puts the ball in danger. It's not one highlight, one clip of a guy wiping his hand like in the middle of a drop back has now turned into this whole thing of like, oh my God, it was all the rain's fault against Brock Purdy. The ball didn't get away from him in that game when he put it squarely in the numbers of the defender who dropped the pick 6. That was just a bad read and a bad throw, and that was just all it was to it. Like, there wasn't anything about the rain with that at all. The guy had the 11th most turnover-worthy plays in the NFL, despite having only the 28th most dropbacks having the 20th most dropbacks of any quarterback in the NFL. Like, and it's just one of those deals where I think we're looking at this by one highlight that ended up making things viral that really is just not really, it's just not the narrative. Brock Purdy has just been he's put the ball in danger all season long. It's not the rain that made it happen. That's just who he is. Now, that isn't anything against necessarily this team in general and this offense. I still think it's fantastic and awesome, but just a pushback to all of that is like, this guy just puts the ball in danger. That's just who Brock Purdy is. Another thing that I've heard, because I will bring up that I think this offense is different whenever Deebo Samuel isn't out on the field. And then I get, people come in this week going like, yeah, but you're discrediting. It's not that. That's lazy. It was Trent Williams that wasn't out there, and that's the reason why. Well, Deebo Samuel missed 3 games this season. One of those games Trent Williams played. Like, Trent Williams played in week 6. So there was only 2 games in which Trent Williams didn't play when Deebo Samuel wasn't out there. In those games, Brock Purdy was sacked 1 time in week 7 against the Vikings. He was sacked twice in week 8 against the Bengals. If you look in week 7 and 8, 2.84 seconds time to throw, which was 11th in the NFL. Weeks 1 to 6, in which he had Trent Williams out there, 2.44 seconds to throw, which was 31st in the NFL. Like, there's just a lot of things that I think people look at and they just go surface level with it without actually digging in and looking at what the numbers actually say for everything. And Adam can make fun of me all he wants to. I don't care at all. I mean, like, we're talking about,
you have no idea what I'm making fun of, so keep going.
That we're looking at, but it's like, if you actually look at the numbers behind like some of these narratives, they don't add up. So anyway, with that, I turn it over to you, Adam.
I was making fun of my lack of utility on this podcast because you guys were 10 minutes deep there before I started bringing in. I'm actually with you, Matthew. You thought I was making fun of you, but I'm with you that the Deebo thing matters. And it matters a lot. And it matters because specifically of the games that you talked about and the look at this offense that we had. There's something that is a weird Voltron about this offense where when all of the pieces are not there, it doesn't go down incrementally. It just kind of falls apart. And I don't understand what it is. And it's happened with Trent Williams and it's happened with Deebo Samuel. It's happened to a degree with Christian McCaffrey, MVP finalist, LOL. What I don't understand is how we can look at a compromised Lions offensive line, a compromised Deebo Samuel, and still see the kind of number that is sitting on this game. So I told you earlier, there's really only truly one side or total that I feel confident about. That, of course, is the one that I mentioned over on Chiefs and Ravens. But if you made me bet anything in this game, I would be betting under on 51.5. Now, as Matt would tell you, as anyone would tell you, you're probably going to see 52 before this is all said and done. So, and you're going to want 52 if it's available. So wait if you want to play the under like I would like to play. But I think there are way more paths to under in this game than there are to over. Let's talk about the Lions for a second, because that's the team we really haven't spent as much time on. What's their best win this year, guys? Kansas City game, right? Like we probably go back to them beating KC on opening night in a game in which they scored 14 points on offense. They got the fluky Kadarius Toney knock up in the air and Brian Branch run back, and they win the game by 1 in Kansas City. And again, they won the game. You're not going to take anything away from them. They don't have another win that really means much of anything for the remainder of the season. And they should have lost to the Rams. That part is clear. They could have lost to the Bucs. The game was tied going into the fourth quarter. And they're going with such a massive step up in class right now that the one thing I feel confident about is that the Lions aren't going to be able to score the way that they've been scoring. So for me, I don't want to try to get into the what's going to happen to the Niners on offense without Debo. But what I do feel more confident about is that the Lions weren't going to be able to score on San Francisco the way they've scored the last couple of weeks in the first place. And with that offensive line being what it is, I worry even more about their ability to put up points.
The total, if anything, I'd probably lean towards the under, but at the same time, it kind of goes against, I guess, my thinking here. I took 7. I don't even have the best of it and came back in for more 7.5 on the Lions. And I loved the 10 with the Packers against the 49ers. Well, if you look, every single thing about this Lions team is better than the Packers. You're taking Goff over Love. You're taking Amon-Ra St. Brown over any receiver that the Packers put on the field out there. You're taking Laporta over any of the tight end options for the Packers. You're taking the offensive line from the Lions over the Packers offensive line 10 times out of 10, even with Jonah Jackson being out. It was still the second best offensive line in all the NFL over the course of the 2023 season. Am I saying that it's going to be the same without one of their components? Obviously not, but it doesn't just completely fall apart. So if I loved the Packers last week to be able to move the ball and score against the 49ers, I don't know why my opinion would fundamentally change, given the fact that we have a much more efficient offense in basically every single facet, specifically the run game and specifically with the two-headed monster that they have out of the backfield as well. So I don't know why my opinion would change from an offensive perspective of what the opposing offense can do against this San Francisco defense that not bad, but league average, right? Not bad, but league average. And so with that, getting one of the top 5 most efficient offenses in the NFL, I'm fairly confident that that they'll be able to kind of keep this thing within a touchdown.
Yeah, I guess we just fundamentally disagree on Packers offense versus Lions offense. Right now, today, I don't know who's taken Jared Goff over Jordan Love. Now Jordan Love's out of the playoffs, so I don't have the choice to take Jordan Love at the moment.
Because he played the Niners.
Well, yeah, because he played the Niners. I don't necessarily think that, and I look at the metrics over the second half of the season, starting from week 9 on, when this Packers team started to look like the Packers team that we recognized for a lot of this season. And I see the Packers 3rd in EPA per play, and I see the Lions 4th. I see Jared Goff down around 10th for EPA CPOE composite, and Jordan Love up at 3rd. So for me, I'm not saying the Lions offense is bad by any stretch of the imagination. They've put up points in both of their playoff games. I think this is a massive step up in class, however, for what they're going to go against with the 49ers pass rush in particular. And so, look, if their offensive line does what it's been able to do for a lot of the season and gives Jared Goff time for his weapons to get open, then maybe they do ultimately put up points. I think that's going to be a challenge overall for the Lions to do offensively what they've done for the last couple of weeks against the Rams and Bucs against the Niners.
Matt, let me put you on the spot.
Yep.
If the Lions and the Packers played on a neutral field this week, you're laying 3 points with the Lions?
What does that have to do with anything? Like what? Literally, what does that have to do with anything?
Well, they're playing the same opponent 2 weeks in a row. Fundamentally, to take this price for the Lions, in my opinion, you have to have them rated significantly higher than the Packers. So I'm just trying to see if you agree with that. I don't. I just disagree that the Lions should be rated this much better than the Packers, and you should be getting this price. I think there's recency bias on what the Niners looked like last week.
It's all relative, right? I mean, yes, we can look and say that the Packers over the second half of the season were comparable to the Lions, which they were. Adam just listed off the stats. I mean, it's like it's micro fractions of things or whatever. I mean, they're comparable, right? The full body of work for the Lions is more impressive and has been over the course of the season. The consistency from week in, week out. And I understand that in a vacuum, we could say that you would take Jordan Love over Jared Goff. I don't go against some of the old school mindset stuff here of experience does matter, and being able to handle some of the things that are going to be thrown your way does matter. We are talking about a quarterback that has a good run in the playoffs and has playoff experience, and all of that is. So again, like, yes, in a vacuum, who would I rather have moving forward to man my franchise? It might be Jordan Love, but like in an NFC Championship game on the road, I would probably take Jared Goff, and I'm being dead serious when I say that. Like, I don't think that that's like crazy to say, given when you take some of the external factors that we can't really put into actual numbers and metrics.
Listen, I will concede that I'm concerned that Brock Purdy is going to get pressured in this game.
Third highest pressure rate in the NFL are the Lions.
Right. And yeah. I've said on more than one occasion on this pod that I think 4/5 of the Niners offensive line are below average pass blockers. So it's incumbent on Shanahan to scheme up some quick hitters and some yak. So if he does, this Lions team was top 5 in missed tackles, and the Niners are the yak kings of the NFL offensively. So that's not good for the Lions defense. But, credit to Brett Gibbons on our staff here for finding this. I think one of my favorite props in this game is George Kittle over 61.5 receiving yards, not just because of the Deebo Samuel situation, but because if you look at the splits of the games where Purdy is pressured more, his targets go way up. In the games where Purdy's pressured 15 plus times, Kittle's averaging almost 8 targets per game. In the games where he's not pressured, or if he's pressured fewer than 15 times, he's only averaging about 4.5 targets per game. Now, what I wanted to check was, is that because he's staying in to block and helping with the pass protection? Is that why? Is like a chicken and egg thing here? And I don't think that's the case, because overall this season, Kittle has actually run more routes than Brandon Ayuk has, and they both played the same number of games this season. So I don't think it's a blocking thing. So I think Kittle's in for a big game here. I like over 61.5 in those 6 games where Purdy has been pressured 15 plus times. Kittle's actually gone over 75 yards in all 6 of them, and the prop's at 61.5 here. So that's the one prop I like.
I think it's tough to play Niners props until we know Deebo's situation, because he just affects things so many ways. I'll tell you the one thing that I do think is an interesting look with or without Deebo. You just mentioned Brandon Ayuk. Right now, Ayuk over 5.5 receptions is plus money. Guys, if we watched how bad these Detroit Lions corners are, like, this is one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. I think Brandon Ayuk is going to be able to be as open as he would like to be, and that's not going to matter necessarily to whether Deebo Samuel is on the field, because at 5.5, I'm not asking for an outsized target share to get there on Brandon Ayuk. And I also think we've seen with San Francisco that this offense doesn't stop, right? Like, this offense doesn't get to a point where they just shut it down. They're going to keep continuing to put up points if they're able to be in a situation where Brock Purdy hasn't been, knocked out of the game and is trying to throw with his left arm like last year.
Yeah, it is. I look to, and we keep talking about like the defense that we talked about with the first game. I wonder in this one. So the Niners run the 7th highest zone percentage in the entire NFL on the defensive side of the ball. We know Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown go and just find these little holes in the defense, and specifically Laporta. I do wonder if we see more man in this one than they typically want to run. I do wonder if they're going to allow Goff to kind of not have to deal with that so much and just look for the little soft spots and the holes and stuff, which again, they were able to thrive on over the course of the year. A lot of that having to do with the addition of Sam Laporta to this offense. I do wonder what San Francisco is going to do to maybe combat that a little bit in the game. I'm with you though, Stephen. Like last week, I know that we were talking about the vulnerabilities. If there is a big one of the 49ers defense would be the run defense. And listen, the season long stats and even the short-term stats kind of bear that out a little bit. I do wonder how much of that is by design to where they want you to do something that's less efficient than passing the ball on them. So again, I'll give them some credit on that front, but we are getting a Lions team that is incredibly efficient at running the ball, right? And that two-headed monster is certainly something that has worked out for them. And the more that they use Gibbs, it seems like the better this offense gets. So I wonder if early on would be something that we could kind of look at. You know, there's in-game props, right? I mean, guys, if you don't open your apps once you make your bets, I mean, like these props change dynamically throughout the course of the game. I do wonder if we see that the offensive line for the Lions isn't looking as bad as we thought, and they are having some success on the ground. I wonder if looking at maybe like a Montgomery or a Gibbs, depending on, you know, what the prop number is in game, might be something to look at as well, because I think the Lions at the end of the day, whether Dan Campbell wants to admit it or not, would like to play ball control here and would like to just try and control this game, and certainly don't want to have McCaffrey and Ayuk and Kittle and all them out on the field as much.
Yeah, and you know he's in an underdog role here. He's going to go for it, right? Like any fourth down situation that's close and analytically, even if it's a coin flip, he might go for it. Yeah. So they're totally playing with house money at this point, and that's kind of why I said that at the beginning, where that's the one part about laying 7 with the Niners that makes me uncomfortable, because, you know, Mr. lost the Super Bowl 28-3 is still being ultra conservative in these games, just trying to get to the finish line with at least one more point than his opponent. And, you know, you have the complete opposite on the other sideline with Dan Campbell here. So, you know, I'm a Niners fan.
Yeah,
I fully admit it. I have been nervous a lot of these weeks. I was far more nervous last week than I am this week. I'll just say that.
Adam, to put a bow on this one, I think to Steven's point, it like could work for you or work against you if you're on the Lions side. Like that's actually the thing that terrifies me as a Lions backer in this, because if you are passing on the threes when it's borderline or even kind of against you, the decision, and you're passing on the threes for the sevens and the sevens don't come, that is the scenario in which this game like gets out of hand, right? I mean, that is if you are foregoing points altogether against this 49ers team, which I do expect to be able to score on this Lions secondary, as most teams have all year long. That is the thing that actually terrifies me with the plus 7.5 is, hey, he makes 2 bad fourth down calls, and then at that point, it's just too far gone.
It's another reason that I like under, because I think it actually puts you in a spot where I like the 49ers defensively against the Lions. And so if I like that, then that leans into where I'm looking overall. And Stephen and I talked about this last week when we talked about the idea of field goals versus touchdowns, and saying, yeah, if I'm on an under, I want field goals. But that being said, there's something really specific in this handicap for me in terms of what I think the Niners are going to be able to do defensively that leans me more toward that under based on the aggressiveness.
Well, you also have two offenses that are, you know, Niners are 30th in pass play percentage this year. Lions are outside the top 20. Like these two teams want to run the ball. So when the total starts with a 5, that's also a pretty good starting point. I agree with Adam on the under here.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing I would look at just from a futures standpoint in all of this, guys, if you are, you know, like kind of looking ahead in all of this stuff, like, you know, there are Super Bowl, you know, there are Super Bowl MVP markets that are already up. There are all that. I mean, like if you honestly think that the Lions are going to upset the 49ers and win this game outright, like Jared Goff is 9-1 to win Super Bowl MVP. You should almost make an accompanying bet with that, because if he makes it to the Super Bowl alone, the fact that he would be a quarterback in the Super Bowl, it's going to be 160 or 170 or something like that, right? I mean, like if you honestly think so, you're putting in a bet. If you honestly and truly believe that they're going to upset the 49ers, you should just make a companion bet of Goff with Super Bowl MVP and different little things like that you could look at specifically for these underdog teams, because you're going to get more value on all of that stuff today than you're going to get when they actually advance.
Yeah,
I'll give you my. Sorry, Adam. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to the thought, like earlier in the week, Lions were sitting around 7-1 for Super Bowl, and think about what Matt's saying. Would you rather have 7-1 or 9-1? There's no way the Lions are winning the Super Bowl if Jared Goff does not play superhuman football for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'll give you my favorite Super Bowl MVP long shot right now. It's George Kittle. I think that look at the spread. The Niners are highly likely to at least get there. I talked to you about the splits when Brock Purdy is pressured. If they get there, they're playing a super blitz happy team in the Chiefs or the number one sack team in the NFL in the Ravens. That probably means more targets for George Kittle if we trust these splits. And in the first matchup against the Ravens, he had more than 100 yards in that game, did George Kittle. And we all know that the media loves to not give Brock Purdy credit for this offense. So if there's any team that's going to have a Super Bowl MVP that's not the quarterback, maybe it's the Niners, and you can get 110-1 on George Kittle right now.
I think there's a reason, I mean, look, I understand why you like the price. It's just that where we are with quarterbacks in the MVP discourse in particular,
very unlikely, I admit.
George Kittle's going to have 150 and 3 touchdowns to even be considered for that award. And at that point, it's still probably Purdy.
I mean, there's a Super Bowl where Mahomes had like barely 250 yards, only 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions against the Niners. And I thought Damian Williams should have won that MVP at like over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. They still gave it to Patrick Mahomes. So your point is very well taken. Maybe there's a situation where that happens and Brock Purdy has 2 picks and Kittle's got 100 yards and 2 touchdowns and he gets it. I agree with you though. It's a very small likelihood, and I'm just talking like pizza money for funsies bet here on Kittle.
One last bet here, guys. Like they have the most XYZ stuff for conference championship week. Most rushing yards. Now the favorite's McCaffrey, as it should be, at -130. Lamar is 4-1. And
knew you were going there.
And like, here's the thing. There is a world that exists that the 49ers just pass all over the Lions, right?
Yeah.
And like McCaffrey finishes with not a bad game, but like 75 rushing yards or 80 rushing yards or something like that. Lamar, there's definitely a world that exists that Lamar runs for 110 yards in this game. Like that is 100% a world that exists. And at 4-1 for me, like if we run this sim 4 times, like Lamar's the leading rusher this week, definitely 1 out of 4 times. And so for me, the 4-1 on Lamar is pretty interesting and pretty juicy for me.
I like it. I agree with you. I think I like that price.
All right, everyone, the articles for all of this that Steven and everybody in the team does over at thelines.com. Be sure and take advantage of that if you haven't already. This channel, absolutely free. And while football season is coming to an end, we will continue on rocking and rolling, golf content, basketball content, college basketball content, all of that stuff as well. And then, of course, Major League Baseball is right around the corner. So be sure, subscribe, everything we do. Absolutely free here. And if you want to continue this discussion, upper right-hand corner of thelines.com is our Discord button. That too, absolutely free, where you can discuss everything that's going on in the sports world with all of your friends and the line staff as well. For Adam, for Steven, I'm Matt. Good luck on all your championship bets.